Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm categorizing this one as my hometown horrors, even though it didn't exactly happen in my hometown, it just happened in my state. So this happened in a southern town called Pike County. Let's just jump right into it. I have been so excited to do this video, you have no idea. It all starts off with Hannah Mae Roden. And Hannah Mae meets an older boy. Hannah is 13. They're at a county fair and she meets 17-year-old Jake Wagner. And they fall in love. At first, Jake thought that she was just an annoying little girl. Like, leave me alone. Why does she keep texting me? Why is she trying to get to know me? But then he gives in and he falls so in love with her. Fast forward 2 years into 2013, Hannah Mae is 15 years old at this time and Jake is 20, and they have their first child and they name her Sophia. But Jake was no longer this Prince Charming that Hannah fell in love with. Jake is abusing Hannah to the extreme. He is controlling what she eats, who she talks to. If Hannah were to go to the bathroom, Jake would follow her and sit by the door. There was one time Hannah and Jake got into an argument and Hannah just leaves. She's removing herself from the situation and Jake follows and he's driving like a madman, following her, trying to run her off the road. Hannah gets away and then she goes and she parks behind a church and she calls her dad and she's telling friends and family, I am so scared of him. I need to get away from him. I don't know what to do. And she is only 18 at this time. She is so young. At the Scioto Valley Fair, Jake and Hannah are kind of getting into it a little bit more. And he grabs her up by her arm and Hannah's cousin just jumps in the middle of the two of them to try to break it up. And that was the first time that Hannah's family saw with their own eyes the abuse. And when the family had something to say about it, Jake would say, y'all need to keep your nose in your own business. Hannah starts telling the family that she is scared of Jake, but even more scared of Jake's dad, Billy. But she does manage to get away partially. They still have the baby together and they share custody and stuff. But Hannah falls in love again very shortly after the breakup with Charlie Gilly. And this is where the relationship and the family dynamic gets kind of confusing because Charlie Gilly has a sister by the name of Hannah Gilly. And Hannah Gilly is engaged to Hannah's brother, Frankie. So it gets a little confusing, but just bear with me. She gets pregnant, and she gets pregnant with a little girl by the name of Kylie. And Jake so desperately wants to be Kylie's dad, but Hannah just doesn't want to get back with him. Charlie is kind of out of the picture. The flame was fast, and then it exhausted really fast too. When things end with Charlie, Hannah gets with a guy by the name of Corey, and Jake was just so distraught. He was crying on everybody's doorstep because he thought oh good, she just needed to get something out of her system with Charlie, so she's gonna get back with me. But then she gets with Corey, so Jake is just so mad. Then Jake tries to get full custody of Sophia, and Hannah's ain't no way in hell. Hannah receives a message from Jake's older brother's ex-wife. So Jake has an older brother by the name of George, and George has full custody of his son that he had with his ex-wife. And the ex-wife messaged Hannah and was I know what they're trying to do. Don't do it. They try to make it seem like it's just easier if they had full custody, but you're still going to see your kids and everything, and the custody agreement's all going to be the same. It's not. And so Hannah messages back and says, there is no way in hell, over my dead body, am I going to sign off custody of Sophia. And Jake's mother was logged into her son's ex-wife's Facebook. You guys are going to kind of get the feel of how weird this damn family is. But so Jake's mother sees what Hannah says and she's like, oh, over your dead body, no problem, sweetie. Hannah is just kind of like feeling a little more reserved about letting Sophia see her dad. She kept with like the custody agreement, but I don't know other people's shared parenting. I don't care to know other people's shared parenting because I have like the perfect shared parenting. Like my son swallowed a light bulb, so I had to take him to the hospital. Don't ask me how, but I called my daughter's dad and I'm like, hey, I need to take Glenn Wyatt to the hospital. Can you come watch the girls? And so I just dropped the girls off at his house. It wasn't his day to have the girls. He was open to watching them. So things like that, it's not really like their dad's day, but I still like need help. So I'm going to ask their dad. Well, Hannah would do that. But then after Jake started his shit, she started asking family members to watch Sophia instead. So Jake was just getting Sophia on his days. So Jake starts telling people around town like, yeah, I'm gonna kill Hannah because I'm not seeing Sophia as much as I used to. And like he's just telling Hannah that too. And Hannah's like, no, you're not. Leave me alone. What the heck are you talking about? Like, and Jake is just so open about this murderous plan. So before we move on, that's just kind of like the backstory of Hannah and Jake and like Sophia and stuff. So let's talk about Hannah's family, because Hannah has a very close-knit family and it was very admirable. There was Christopher Roden Sr., who was 40 years old, his brother Kenneth Roden, who was about 44, their cousin Gary Roden, who was about 38, Dana Roden, who was married to Chris Roden, but they separated. Together, Dana and Chris Sr. had Frankie Roden, who was 20, Hannah Mae Roden, who was 19, and little Chris Jr., who was 16. And they all lived pretty much like on a plot of land together. It was a little bit like a stretch of road, but they all lived very close together. Hannah Mae was described as the average country girl. She was always barefoot. She loved animals. She loved fishing. And she just wanted to be a really good mom. Like, that was her focus. Sophia and Kylie were her entire world. Chris Sr. was described as strong as a bull. He worked at Bear Lake Construction, and he would, like, take apart cars and fix them up as, like, a side gig. Dana Roden was a nurse's aide, and she was just a really hard worker. She always wanted to make sure her kids had everything, so she worked really hard in her field. And she was described as just always goofy, making people laugh, like a very bright person. Gary Roden lived with Chris Roden. They were cousins, but they were best friends. And Gary was described as just a mama's boy, like just so soft and loving. Kenneth Roden, he had children, and he lived a little down the road from his younger brother, Chris Sr., but he was described as always wanting to help and just a very kind soul. Frankie Roden was described as an amazing father. He was a father of 2 children, and all the ladies loved him. Like, Frankie was so handsome. Frankie loved the demolition derby, but the thing he loved more than the demolition derby was his fiance and the mother of his 6-month-old son, Hannah Gilley. Hannah was like homecoming queen. She was a gorgeous girl. She really wanted to make a good life for her kids, and she was in college. And she loved Frankie's older son just like it was her own. She was just so caring, so beautiful. The community loved her. Chris Jr. was described as quiet and gentle. He also loved the demolition derby, He'd always be working on cars. And he was also described as like the wild child of the bunch. He had a signature look. He'd always be wearing his muck boots, some jeans, and a camo jacket. On April 22nd, 2016, Bobby Jo Manley, who was Dana's sister, was going to Chris Sr.'s house to let the animals out. And this wasn't anything unusual. She usually always helped with the animals. She goes in there and Chris and Gary were nowhere to be found, but there was just a trail of blood from the front door all the way back to Chris Sr.'s bedroom. So she goes over there and she sees Chris Sr., and it looks like he got the shit beat out of him, laying on the floor, and his cousin, Gary Roden, laying next to him, also covered in blood. So she freaks out. She calls 911. She's telling 911, I think somebody came and beat the crap out of these guys. Then she goes to Frankie's house to tell Frankie what happened to his dad. And Frankie's, so here's Chris's house. Frankie's house is a little bit like catty corner. She goes to Frankie's house and she knocks on the door, and 3-year-old Brentley, who is Frankie's older son, answers the door. And so Bobby is like, what? So she picks up Brentley and she's like, where's Daddy? Brentley says, Daddy's playing zombie. And Bobby's heart drops. She's like, what do you mean he's playing zombie? And he's like, come look. And leads Bobby Jo to the back bedroom where Frankie and his fiance, Hannah Hazel, are shot dead. And their 6-month-old is trying to nurse off of Hannah Hazel's dead body. So Bobby takes Brentley and runs outside and calls 911. After she calls 911, she calls her brother James, and her brother James arrives, and James comes with his wife, and they're both just so distraught. 4 of their family members have been found dead, and 2 children are alive to witness all of it. James leaves because he needs to go tell Dana what happened. So he goes into Dana's house, and it's really quiet and all the lights are still off, but he can hear baby Kylie just screaming her lungs off. So he goes straight back to Dana's room and he's saying, hey Dana. And he's like shaking Dana's body. She works third, so he thought that she was just asleep. But there's a pillow over her face, so he goes to lift up the pillow and the pillow is stuck. That's when he drops it and he runs out of the house and he calls 911. And he calls April to come get the baby because the baby's screaming its head off. And the police go in there and Dana is shot and the pillow is stuck to her face because of the blood. She had been shot right in the face. And then Hannah Mae is shot and then her body is positioned back up so baby Kylie can still nurse off of her. And the police can't find Chris Jr. So now we have Chris Sr., Gary, dead. Frankie, Hannah Hazel, dead. Hannah Mae, Dana, dead. By this time, everybody in the community has heard about the Rodens being shot dead. And everyone is wondering where Chris Jr. is. And they go to a church on Union Hill Road. And the whole community is there together. And they're just comforting each other. But Chris Sr.'s brother Kenneth isn't there. One of Kenneth's cousins is like, well, I'm going to go check on him because I can't get a hold of him. And his brother was just shot dead. He was worried. So he goes there. Kenneth is shot dead with dollar bills spread all over his body. So his cousin calls 911. And as the police have Dana and Hannah Mae's house all blocked off, they find Chris Jr. shot as he was hiding behind the bed and the wall. He was shot 4 times. Everybody was shot to overkill. Dana Roden was shot 5 times in the head. Hannah Gilley was shot 5 times in the head. Frankie was shot 3 times in the head, but at such close range, the gun was actually touching his head as he was shot 3 times. Gary was shot 3 times with the gun touching his head. Hannah was shot 2 times in the head. And Kenneth was shot 1 time in the eye. So now the whole town is wondering, why did somebody kill an entire family? But that is where I'm going to leave off on the first video. This is going to be a series. I'm not sure how many videos I'm going to make for this, but I'm going to get all of it covered. And I am telling you, the crime scene seems bad, but I have been watching every court case, every time I see it on the news, and it just keeps getting worse. Stay tuned. If you like this video, please like and subscribe because there is so much more to come.